from Castle Goring, from Nikki and from me. Baby girl says life is returning to normal. She's very happy to take an occasional break. So, without further ado, baby girl and I are going to plunge right in. And I should say, I'm slightly bundled up because I am still not 100%. But rather than moan, groan and lie down, I simply bundle up and get up and do what I need to do. So to those of you who are wondering, no, the heating's on, the castle's warm. I'm just not as warm as I would naturally be. So also, today we will start off on a relatively light and inconsequential and entertaining note, but then we are going to go to rather weightier matters because things are happening around the world that I have been asked questions on, and I am going to answer them. So, if I may, without further ado, I will say CCF says, how are Harry and Meghan getting any awards from the NAACP? If I was head of that organisation, I would have warned the person who is in charge of that decision that they are the worst couple to associate with. The NAACP lost all credibility when they announced that they were giving those two an award, in my opinion. Someone who denied that they were a person of colour until they were middle-aged, and even then only used it to claim victimhood? Not a good look at all, NAACP. And do I agree? Yes. With no great reluctance, I have to say. You know, either the people on the other side of the Atlantic who are entertaining thoughts that Harry and Meghan are desirable don't speak English, or the language they speak has a totally different meaning to the language we speak on this side of the Atlantic. But I know an awful lot of Americans are speaking the same language that I'm speaking and that other people on this side of the Atlantic are speaking as well. Well, it's obvious that Ken Sunshine and Sunshine Sachs are up to their necks in this as well. There are links between Sunshine Sachs and the NAACP. You know, when I was younger, there was an expression that people used to say about a certain type of business person or commercial person or money-orientated person in America. And they used to say that as far as they were concerned, BS reigned supreme. I hate to say it, but I think there is merit to that sentiment. I struggle to comprehend on some level how PR can be so powerful in the modern world that irrespective of the reality, that ideas are put forward and crammed down everybody's throat, as if black is white, pink is green, good is bad, bad is good, flat is round, round is flat. It is an absolute inversion, if not perversion, of reality. And there seems to be a commercial construct that says it doesn't matter what Mr. and Mrs. Joe public think. All that matters is that if you can cram it down Mr. and Mrs. Joe public's throat, sufficient people will believe it, that it makes it worthwhile. There's often such a disconnect with reality. But to not become too esoteric, let me say, the NAACP, which, as we all know, is the National Association for the Advancement of Coloured People. Actually, before I even go any further, in this age of political correctness, where people are lambasted for saying somebody's coloured instead of colour, because you're not allowed to use the adjective, you've got to use the genitive of the noun, and if you don't, some people will say you're racist. Why hasn't the National Association for the Advancement of Coloured People changed their name to National Association for the Advancement of People of Colour? I actually think it's a good thing that they haven't changed the name, because I think the mere fact that they haven't changed the name is a positive, because that was their name. They were founded in 1909. That was their name then, and people of colour are also coloured people. The two words are exactly the same, have the same meaning. So I'm glad that they haven't changed it. But I just make the point that if people can be lambasted for saying that you're coloured instead of colour, and the very organisation that is there for the advancement of coloured people doesn't change their name, doesn't that strike you as slightly dissonant? Something of a contradiction in terms? Well, of course, the headlines were full of the president has invited Harry and Meghan. So on first reading, you would have thought that the President of the United States had asked Harry and Meghan, and we're going to honour them. Well, of course, it turns out the President of the NAACP, Derek Johnson, is the one who has asked them. And he says, "We're thrilled to present this award to Prince Harry and Meghan, the Duke and Duchess of Sussex, who together have heeded the call to social justice." Oh my God. They've heeded the call to social justice. So, well, of course, social justice requires that poor black people in South Africa's suffering is nothing compared to Meghan's. But anyway, let's continue to read the diatribe. Oh, and have joined the struggle for equity both in the US and around the world. How come when Meghan was on her way up, she wasn't coloured? And now that she's there, and it's a card to play, she's coloured. And please, don't correct me. It's the National Association for the Advancement of Coloured People. So Meghan's just a coloured person. But she wasn't a coloured person when she was hustling those buns on the way up. But now that she has arriven, not even arrived, she has arriven. Yeah, I'm so classy, I just arriven. She's coloured. God. And Harry and Meghan, in true ignorant form, have said, It's an honour to be recognised by President Derek Johnson and the NAACP, whose efforts to propel racial justice and civil rights are as vital today as they were nearly 115 years ago, the couple said in a statement. Well, I have to tell you, I've heard many jokes, but that's a bigger one than most. Harry and Meghan, no. The efforts today are nowhere near as vital as they were 115 years ago, when people of colour were genuinely downtrodden, when they weren't given breaks for being people of colour the way they now are. Because nowadays, you have black privilege. You also have black inequality and white privilege and white inequality. Because the most disadvantaged group in this country is young white men, teenagers and early 20s. They are the most disadvantaged group in this country. I'm pretty sure there are parallels in America. And how dare you, Harry and Meghan, erase the 115 years of accomplishment? How dare you erase those? But hang on a second. Let me do the math. 15 and 9 is 24, isn't it? Yeah, 15 and 9 is 24. So it wasn't 115 years ago. It was 113 years ago. They can't even get that right. I really think that on some level, had Harry and Meghan not turned out to be the complete pariahs that they are in many quarters, had they not turned out to be as reviled as they are justifiably being for their conduct, it would have been a wonderful award. When Meghan and Harry got married, everybody that I know thought, what a wonderful opportunity to advance the colour question in a positive light. Well, their conduct has shown that she is an ace opportunist and he is an ace idiot. So if the NAACP want to honour them, yeah, it will get a few column inches. Everybody's who's not an idiot is going to think, oh, Yawnsville. Yawnsville. Yet more BS, to be crude. Yet more BS. But then again, we know that Harry and Meghan's favourite accomplishment is waste matter. So, Endless Possibility says, Lady C, did you hear? The Jamaican government does not want to pay for Prince William and Catherine's Commonwealth tour to their country. What does this mean for the royals and the Jamaican government? Is this a good time to announce Commonwealth tours in this hostile atmosphere around the world? Also, was this move influenced by Meghan and Harry? Did they damage the image of the royal family forever? One more thing. Why are the Harkles receiving an NAACP award? They have done nothing. I mean, this is among winners such as Muhammad Ali. Help us to understand this. Well, to take the last part first, yes, they're there with Muhammad Ali, Venus and Serena Williams, I think Ralph Abernathy. They're there with some people who have genuinely accomplished a lot. Well, what has Harry accomplished? He married a woman who did everything in her power to eradicate every sign of her African heritage and continues to do so. Where's the afro? Where's the curly hair? Where's the naturalness? I mean, that nose, it's so pinched that, I've never seen nostrils that look like a clothes hanger before, but she has them. She has them. And what has she accomplished? She married a prince and turned him into the turd and toad that he really is. That's what she did. That's no accomplishment. Yeah, they're up there with some good people, but it will get some column inches and it will be popular in certain quarters. Now, I know as a fact, because I was at a luncheon last week where a woman of colour was vitriolic about Meghan and actually lambasted me for being too nice about Meghan in the early days and said that effectively that she didn't understand how I couldn't see through Meghan from the word go because she could. Well, and the very first person who really had a go at me about Meghan, and I've mentioned this on a show before, was a Nigerian girl living in Sweden who was here for a wedding. And it was right after the marriage. And she had a real go, and I was absolutely stunned. So, many people of colour all over the world can see right through Meghan. But to those who can't, it is a positive. So, I'm not going to knock the NAACP particularly. I think they could have done a heck of a lot better. I think they could have nominated, for instance, the deputy governor of, I think it's Virginia, who is a Jamaican-born black woman who is now the deputy governor, Republican deputy governor of Virginia. But I suppose that wasn't going to be woke enough. Because, of course, they need to consider the politics as well. Well, insofar as the tour part of it is concerned, various royals are going to be touring the Commonwealth because the Queen is the head of the Commonwealth and she's going to be 96 in 2 months. She can't be going on a Platinum Jubilee tour herself. So members of the royal family are going in her stead. Evidently, there's been a bit of a kerfuffle about that the Jamaican government isn't paying. Not that they don't want to pay. And I must bring you up on that point. And I'm going to quote from David Morgan, the Minister without portfolio in the office of the Prime Minister with responsibility for information, who says the government doesn't pay for royal visits. There are obviously going to be costs if a VIP is coming to your country. There will obviously be costs as it relates to per diem for security personnel who will be engaged to ensure security, which is a slightly verbose way of saying they need to hire extra people. any dignitary that comes to Jamaica, the government will obviously have to foot a cost, but the government will not be paying for the visit. That was a question that was asked by mischief makers, because Jamaica has a political movement that wants Jamaica to become a republic. They don't want a royal head of state. They want a Jamaican head of state. Well, I have no axe to grind one way or the other where that's concerned. I get the point from both points of view. And to me, it is a matter of complete indifference. Yes, I'm Jamaican. Yes, I'm British. Does it matter if we have the Queen as head of state? Slightly. Because at the moment, the Privy Council is a fully functional part of our Jamaican system. Will it be after Jamaica is a republic? Will there be the final recourse, or is there going to be this sort of politicking and the corruption that allows in republics for one political party or another to be ascendant and to push forth its interests to the detriment of the country as a whole? Now, Jamaica had a Governor-General called Sir Florizel Glasspool. Sir Florizel was actually a great friend of my great uncle Julian Smedmore, so I knew him from I was a child. He was appointed by the PNP, which is the more left-wing party, and he remained Governor-General even when the GLP, the more centrist political party, got in, because he was a fine, upstanding man who, as Governor-General, took no political side. Everybody recognised it, but the Sir Florizel Glasspools of this world are few and far between. The reason why the question of the cost was brought up was that it would create mischief, and you would be able to ask the question that you have asked. Endless possibility. Because without the mischief making of the question being asked, the news couldn't have been spun that the Jamaican government doesn't want to pay. It's not that it doesn't want to pay, it's that it doesn't pay. I hope that explains the question. Well, I should say the answer, because I'm stunned that yet again things get twisted to such an extent. You know, William and Catherine, I'm sure, will go down an absolute treat in Jamaica. Harry went down a real treat in Jamaica. Harry was an absolute rip-roaring success in Jamaica. He befriended various people, including Usain Bolt. And then, when he linked up with Meghan, he, Pontius Pilate, moved on. Oh, sorry, it's no longer called Pontius Pilate, is it? It's called, what's it called again? Oh, gosh, what's that word? Oh. When they freeze people out? What's it called again? Oh, dear. Icing them. Oh, cancelling them. Ghosting them. You couldn't make any of it up. The whole thing is just... So, why is it that on a daily basis one has to contend with such disinformation and misinformation, much of which, it has to be said, emanates from the Harrys and Meghans of this world. They're always going on and on about disinformation and misinformation, but they and their cohorts are the absolute architects of disinformation and misinformation. Do they have anything to do with this? Certainly, Harry and Meghan's behaviour and the accusations they made against the royal family have not helped with certain segments of the Jamaican population. You know, some people believe in solidarity no matter the cost and no matter how unreasonable solidarity is. And Meghan has been very clever playing the race card to get solidarity from basically a lot of ignoramuses and losers, because that's really what they are. Because civilized, intelligent, well-informed, thinking people of colour see right through her. They certainly saw through her a long time before I did. Torata says, what a name, but that's so interesting. Dearest Lady C, what is your opinion on the current happenings in the Ukraine? Dear me. Is Putin really planning to annex the whole country? Do the people in Donetsk consider themselves Russian? I would normally have asked my Hungarian father, but he passed away just before the pandemic. You have a well-informed and well-rounded worldview similar to his. Please share your thoughts. Well, Tobos Torata, I noticed that you say your father was Hungarian, and there are Hungarian links to this question, and that's why your father would have had an informed opinion on the matter. Historic links going back. There are also historic links to various other states, including the Ottoman Empire, going back. So I am going to actually answer the question by saying what the history is, because the history is indisputable, even when people wish to deny it. It is there in black and white and has always been. And I'm not going to answer whether I think that Putin really is planning to annex the whole country. I am not prepared to stray into territory that I have no business entering into. You need to remember that my children are Russian born and I'm part Russian. I am also very proudly born a British citizen and proud to remain a British citizen. And in the event of war, I will be loyal to my country, which is Britain. So I hope I make my position perfectly clear. However, these are the facts. Do the people in Donetsk, before I get on to the history, do the people in Donetsk consider themselves Russian? By and large, yes. I'm going to give you a little clue. Rus, the people of the Rus, Russians. Russia started in what is now called Ukraine. The word Ukraine in the Russian language means border. It is the border of the lands of the people of the Rus, the Russians. Does it give you a clue as to the realities of the situation? The Tsars of Russia were known as Tsars of all the Russias from 1547. The United States of America hadn't even been discovered then. It didn't exist. I make that point because when communism fell and Yeltsin appealed to Europe and to the West to join the Western family of nations, it is the American government that would not countenance having the Russian people as a part of the Western Alliance. In my opinion, that was a golden opportunity missed. But there was a reason why they had to spurn the advances of Russia. Because America has, as Eisenhower warned us, President Eisenhower warned the world about the military-industrial complex in the United States of America in the 1950s. He was a president of the United States. He was the commander-in-chief of the armies in Europe during the Second World War, at the end of the Second World War. The military-industrial complex has extreme power in the United States of America. The American economy is the only economy on earth that has been economically on a war footing since the Second World War. That's where most of America's tax money goes. Now, it was a very good thing when communism existed. Is it a good thing when communism doesn't exist and your former enemy wants to join your club and you say no because you need a perceived enemy, not an actual enemy? You just need somebody who will justify the whopping taxes that the American people are forced to pay as the military-industrial complex continues to flourish. Of course, what has happened now is that there is a strong Russian leader and an American leader of, let me put it this way, not everybody regards him as a strong leader. Not everybody regards him as a capable leader. Even amongst his former supporters, people who voted for him. So this is an ideal opportunity. But without going too much into the politics and sticking to the history, the reason why the Tsars of all the Russias were called the Tsars of all the Russias is that the Russian nation began in what is now called Ukraine. It was founded by Rurik. The state of the Rus, the Russians, was founded by Rurik, who was born around AD 824 and died in 879. He was in reality the father of the Russian state as it existed until its dismantling, firstly as a result of the Russian Revolution of 1917, then the downfall of communism, when the Supreme Soviet of the Ukraine declared its independence on the 24th of August 1991. Ukraine in Russia, in the Russian language, means border. So it's the border of the people of the Rus, the Russian people. Is there a major difference between the Ukrainians and the Russians? That's arguable, because is there a difference between somebody who is British from 600 AD and they are from Canterbury, and somebody who is British from 600 AD and they are from Glasgow? I would submit there's very little difference. They're both British. Even if there are differences in that some are Anglo-Saxon and some are Celtic, nevertheless they are all British. But there's a less distinction between the Ukrainians and the Russians, because they're all the same people, racially, quite unlike the British, where you have Angles, Saxons, Celts, etc. I'm not saying there aren't mixtures in the Ukraine, because also what we may not realize is that what we now call Ukraine is an artificial construct created in 1922 by Vladimir Lenin. Are we seriously expected to accept that traditional Russian territory, the seat of the Russian state, is not Russian because in 1922 Vladimir Lenin created the state of Ukraine, because it didn't exist as a state before that. It was an amalgam, a composite of various other states. There's a famous picture by Ilya Repin called The Reply of the Zaporozhian Cossacks, which I would encourage all of you to look up. I will actually try to have a picture of it posted at the end of this. So the point I'm making is that we in the West are trying to make out that the Russian people have no right to claim that their state started in Ukraine and that they are less Russian than the Rus of the Ukraine. I'm afraid history would have to argue that point. But to show you where it all began, Rurik is a legendary figure. He was, as I said a bit earlier, a chieftain of the Varangian Rus. And in the year 862, he was invited to reign in Ladoga. He moved the capital shortly thereafter to Novgorod. Novgorod in Russian means new city. The capital was then moved after his death by his successor Oleg, who was his kinsman and effectively the regent for his son Igor, who was too young to rule. He moved the capital to Kiev when he captured that city in 882. Thereafter, it was known as the state of Kiev Rus. It is an accepted fact by all Russians that the state of Russia started at that time, was started by Rurik, carried through by his descendants, and it then continued because the Rurikid, which is the name of the dynasty, the state persisted virtually intact from the way it had been left until the Mongol invasion, which was several hundred years later. And thereafter, under various guises, it was the kingdom of Ruthenia, the Principality of Tver, the Grand Duchy of Vladimir, the Grand Duchy of Muscovy, the Novgorod Republic, and the Tsardom of Russia. A series of steps. This was until 1598. The last of the Rurikid was a collateral of the main branch of the family. He was Tsar Vasily IV. He was from the house of Shushki, and it was a cadet branch of the Rurik family, and he reigned until 1612. When he died, it was called the time of the Troubles, and all of the boyars, the ruling princes, got together and elected Michael Romanov, who was, I think if I remember correctly, he was a 16-year-old, to be the Tsar. And that was the beginning of the Romanov dynasty. Now, it's no secret to many people that I'm friendly with members of the Romanov dynasty. It's also no secret that I have Russian blood and that I have always had very strong links with the Russian community. And in fact, over the Easter weekend, a descendant of Rurik is going to be coming to spend the Easter weekend here. I just make those points for what they're worth, because, you know, people can rant and rave and chat all the nonsense they want to, but the fact of the matter is, the facts are the facts. And you can try to change the facts by lying about them, but you're not changing the facts, you're simply changing the perception. A group of the Varangians known as the Rus settled in Novgorod in 862. They were under the leadership of their chieftain Rurik. Before Rurik, the Rus might well have been ruled by an earlier hypothetical polity named the Rus Hanaget. A Hanaget would have been a prince, a Muslim prince. They were Muslim. Well, they became Christian. Because after Oleg, who was Rurik's successor, conquered Kiev in 1882 and established the state of Kievan Rus, thereafter, it was the Russian dynasty. The Russian. Rus, the people of Rus are the Russians. All I will say in conclusion is, it would be, in my opinion, a great disservice to humanity if the world went to war over this question. With respect to all of those ignoramuses who don't understand that Ukraine is the Russian word for border, and that the border of the Russian state was Ukraine, and it doesn't really matter what President Biden and all of the other people who have no concept of the history of the region have to say. The fact of the matter is, not only do most Russians regard other parts of Russia, not necessarily the territory, but the people of Russia as still Russian, and that includes residents of the Ukraine. There is also the question that since America objected to missiles in Cuba, why would Russia not object to missiles or antagonistic forces on its border? Cuba was never a part of the United States of America. We can't say the same for the Ukraine, which for most of the existence of the Russian state was a part of it, ceased to be after a revolution, was never the entity that and the polity that it was created by a communist dictator called Lenin, and then taken over after Lenin sold out the Russian Empire to the German Empire at the Treaty of Brest-Litovsk. When Germany lost the war, a lot of this territory was lost to, for a time, the Russian people. Then it was reconstituted under the Soviets. Now, I'm no communist, but I have to tell you, I think it's quite extraordinary that people who regard themselves as believers in democracy would consider it feasible that a state is created by a dictator against the will of many of the people. I mean, let's remember, the Russian people never had a vote as to what aspects of its territory should cease to be a part of the Russian Federation or the Russian state. So if we're going to be really democratic, I think we need to look at the whole of the history, and I think we need to come up with solutions that satisfy history as well as the present. As Gumby says, just when I think these two have sunk without a trace, something like this comes along. I just read this and it makes me positively sick. Prince Harry and Meghan Markle say that they stand with the people of Ukraine and urge world leaders to join them opposing Putin's breach of international and humanitarian law. The Duke and Duchess of Sussex issued their message on the ARCHIWELL or however they want to pronounce it this week, charity website. The statement also condemned the breach of international and humanitarian law. The words followed Boris Johnson's condemnation of Putin earlier on Tuesday. Lady C, do you have any comments on these developments? Well, I've already commented on them just now. I'm sticking to the history of the matter, and I will simply wrap up by saying, yet again, Meghan Markle and Harry show what not only idiots they are, but how uninformed they are. Because the fact of the matter is that what are they talking about? Breach of humanitarian law. What humanitarian law? An international law. A state that is split asunder by revolution is not a lawful state. I get why Boris Johnson and certain members of the Western group of nations will take the position they take. I get why the American president is taking the position he's taking. But I would sincerely hope that we do not go to war over a territory that, if you just use your common sense, the people of the Rus are Russian. You know, in 1939, Britain went to war with Nazi Germany, and I have no brief for Nazi Germany. I think Hitler was an appalling human being, and had he prevailed, I would never have existed, because my great-grandmother was a Jewess, and although she became a Christian upon marrying my great-grandfather, under the Nuremberg laws, she remained a Jewess. My grandmother was therefore a Jewess, and so under the Nuremberg laws would have been my mother. So I wouldn't have been existing at all, because they would all have been eradicated. But in 1939, Hitler wanted back the Danzig corridor. We went to war because Hitler wanted the Danzig corridor, and we thought we needed to stop Hitler. And so when Hitler created an incident to invade Poland, really because he wanted back the Danzig corridor. I don't know why we simply didn't give him back the Danzig corridor, I've got to tell you. Because I think that Hitler, and had we not ended up doing what we did, Hitler and Stalin would have ended up slugging it out amongst themselves, and it would have saved a very great deal of trouble for the Western world, and it would have saved half of Europe from communism for the remainder of the 20th century. But the point I'm making is, we went to war to preserve the independence of Poland, and 6 years later, we stood by and said nothing as Stalin annihilated the Polish people. So the reason why we went to war, it turned out, was completely something that we didn't back up by the end of the war. I don't think my life, your life, or anybody's life in the Western world is worth what is going on in that part of the world. That's my personal opinion. I sympathize with people who are going to lose their lives. But America and the West need to understand they need to respect other people's rights as well, and they need to respect history. And the lessons of history are sometimes it's better to let somebody get away with something to which they have an arguable right, rather than pontificating, and at the end of the day, after all the pontifications have taken place and the loss of millions of lives, we spin around and say, oh, well, we went to war for Poland's independence, but go on, Stalin, gobble up Poland. I'm afraid that, to me, is a rationale that is completely untenable. The world is in the situation of recalibrating. There will be a great Russian superpower. There will be a great Chinese superpower. There will hopefully be a great Western superpower if we play our cards properly and learn the lessons of history. We, the British people, have not always learnt the lessons we should have learnt. Hence why we lost the British Empire. That is one of the lessons of history. We should have left Serbia and Austria to get on with the business at hand. We should never have entered the First World War. We should have left it to remain a localized conflict. What did we get out of it? What did the world get out of it? Advancement? Absolutely not. The peak of Western civilization was just before the First World War. And on that note, I will say, let Meghan and Harry chat all the rubbish that they want. They're idiots. They're arses. They bray like the arses they are. And who are they to make an announcement like that? I don't see Prince Charles making any announcement, nor the Queen. I don't see the King of Norway, the King of Sweden, or the Queen of Denmark. I don't see anybody else making an announcement. And this delusional duo makes an announcement along those lines. And they don't even know what they're speaking about. Those are my thoughts on the subject. And if I have antagonized or alienated some of you, so be it. I go with the facts. I don't allow my sentiments to cloud my reason. And I think we always need to consider the opinion of the other party. And wherever possible, we should avoid unnecessary conflict. And in my opinion, it would be an act of supreme folly for the world to go to war over the fact that the Russians want back, if not the whole of the seat of their state, at least a part of it. And on that note, I will say, I hope this has been of some interest to you. If it has, please like, share, subscribe, press the notification bell, and please keep the questions coming in. Preferably on a rather lighter note henceforth. Thanks and goodbye.